Well, good day, everyone. Welcome to Club Grubbery, which will be screened on Monday, the 19th. Monday, the 19th, you'll be watching our guest coming on now, Warren Tredrea. Good to have you back on, John.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, looking forward to that coming out Monday. It'll be a great interview.
Yeah, champion Port Adelaide AFL player who lost his job with Channel 9 and has been fighting them. You know what? Brian told me so. I know everything I need to know because Brian told me so. Channel 9, you can trust them for the news?
Yep.
Maybe not. Speaking of other trusted organisations, Johnny, before we go to this interview, I've been in contact with several Qantas people, and
Yep.
it appears that in Qantas, Vanessa Hudson and the new chairman of the board want to rebrand the company to
Of
get
course they do.
what's
Why
that?
wouldn't you?
They want to rebrand it and they want to reset it is a better word. They want to get it out of the Joyce era, forgetting that
Mm.
Vanessa Hudson herself was one of the prime architects with Alan Joyce to bring this garbage down.
Yep.
We have been saying for years just how not only inept but corrupt the human resources department is at Qantas,
Yep.
include industrial relations and the legal department in Qantas. And we have been talking with, on the sidelines, a great many pilots and flight attendants who have been crucified by this mob. But the chickens are coming home to roost, Qantas. We've
Mm.
seen some documents, we've seen some emails, and we're going to blow the lid on the whole thing. Now,
Yep.
that's going to be happening in a couple of weeks' time when we get all our ducks in a row. But I can tell you, to give you a teaser, we have emails where base managers were contacting Alan Joyce saying, we didn't sign on for this. What you're doing to these people is reprehensible. It's immoral. Now, Alan Joyce stood up in the media and said that what Qantas was doing was lawful and reasonable. Well, we're going to show you just how unlawful and unreasonable this whole process has been, where people who were on their deathbed for a time, battling cancer and other illnesses, and some still are, have been treated like dogs by this organisation. And we're going to bring it out.
Mm.
So we're going to tease this out over the next couple of weeks because we want to get some mainstream media attention. And Vanessa Hudson, if you think that you're going to reset the image of Qantas after what we put out there, you're in for a shock.
Oh, Hoodie, they couldn't reset the image. Here they are buying all these new Airbus airplanes, these 321s, are they? These Neos or something, something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they've just had to apparently buy another whole heap of 737s from Singapore Airlines because they've just realised that they can't land this new aeroplane at Christchurch. It's because of the weight limitations. And I hear that they're running 737s up to, is it Coffs Harbour, instead of these 220s because they can't start the engines because of where they have to park them because of the wind components on
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 the
the tail.
starting procedure. Look, it's just um,
Couldn't run a hot bath.
Qantas is an abject failure, and it has been for quite a long time. And it's a shame because it doesn't need to be, and it needs to be improved. And hopefully, the new chairman of the board really wants to kick some butt and get this happening. But it's not happening. It's only going from bad to worse. And I can tell you, Qantas, the number of people who have been wronged by your HR department, who are now getting, they've been poked long enough, they're all going to speak out and they're going to speak out on our program. And we're lining up some mainstream media outlets who are going to speak, they're going to speak out to as well. We're going to do it. Why? Because it's just, it needs to be done. So,
And not to forget, Hoodie, too, let's just remind old Qantas that we've also recorded a video that will be played posthumously from a captain that will blow the lid off that organisation. I mean, what was revealed in that multi-hour interview was an absolute disgrace.
absolute. And why are we going to put it out posthumously? Because if we do it before, it will jeopardise his case to make sure that his family is properly compensated.
Hmm.
And that's reprehensible. And why is he in this position? Because you mandated that he get vaccinated and the vaccines are killing him. And he's
And
got
you're self-insured. And you're self-insured, you mongrels.
self-insured. Yep. So anyhow, that's what's coming. Stay tuned to this space. We're going to mention this particular story every time we do Club Grubbery between now and when we air the story. We're going to get our ducks in a row and we're going to push it out there. So, Qantas, if you've got any skeletons in your closet, now is the time to get it out and sort it out. Now is the time. We're not blackmailing you, but now is the time to put things right for the loyal staff who's served you for many years. Reprehensible stuff, mate.
Come and talk to us, Vanessa.
Come and talk to us. Yeah, we're happy to talk to you. We're happy to illuminate you, Vanessa, because you'll probably say, "I had no idea that was going on," and we'll see where that goes. But we're gonna get all these documents sorted, and we're gonna bring it out. So there it is, straight from the horse's mouth. Anyhow, Warren Tredrea, we've been waiting for him to come on for 3 years. He's been fighting Channel 9 in court. That battle's over. He can now legally speak, and boy, doesn't he speak, Johnny.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. What can you say when you think of Nick Coatsworth from Channel 9, the former Deputy Chief Health Officer on A Current Affair, Ali Langdon's program, saying these people should never have been forced to have the vaccine.
They didn't stop transmission. Mandates were wrong. Now, that's a high enough profile within health, federal health, and within media to bring everybody to a position where we should be rethinking this. There's a whole lot of stuff coming out. This isn't over by a long way.
No. We're just finding the accelerator.
Yep, we are. So stay close to this interview, share it. It doesn't work unless you spread it around. Warren Tredrea, champion on and off the field. We hope you enjoy the interview, and let's go to the interview right now. Well, g'day everyone, and it's Friday the 16th of May, another Club Grubbery show coming your way, and it's an absolute ripper. We've been waiting for 3 years for this. Johnny, how good is this?
Well, yeah, it would have been good to have Warren on during the Athletes with Voices, but unfortunately, the law took precedence over that. But here we are.
Here we are, and Warren Tredrea, former star player for Port Adelaide in the AFL. Welcome to Club Grubbery, mate. It's great to have you on.
Thank you, boys. I've been watching from afar. I know, Hoody, we've spoken many times about coming on, but I had a thing called a legal case going on, and probably I should have come on earlier the way that worked out. But let's face it, as I've always learned, either in footy and media, stand for something or fall for nothing. And this is probably the greatest stand for something that I've ever seen in my time. And still baffles me to this day that we've got politicians, we've got media, we've got doctors, we've got people who were seduced, coerced, whatever you wanted to call it, are still trying to say that what's gone on was sort of quite normal considering the global pandemic we face. But we all have different views, and I think that is the wonderful thing. We stifled free speech. Off the back of free speech, bullying took over, coercion took over, and now we have a few warriors who stand aloud, and you guys have certainly done that over the journey, and I've launched my own Ballsy podcast, and we sit back and go, hey, my life was a fraud in a way. I love playing Aussie rules footy. You mentioned I played for 14 years, captain my boyhood club. We won a premiership. Life was great. Went into mainstream media. Was a presenter. Thought, geez, get paid well to read about 8 minutes of work a week. Well, sorry, a day. Effectively, it probably worked out a week for the amount of words per minute you did. But my life was turned upside down at the end of 21 when mandates came in, and I said no for personal reasons.
Warren, you played for the AFL in South Australia. You played, I read, a total of about 260 games, 255 for your club, two for your state, three for your country. As you said, you won countless medals. I've got the thing here. I could read it out for our overseas. In fact, I will, because we've got a lot of viewers from overseas who need to know. Warren was playing primarily for Port Adelaide, which is one of the South Australian clubs, 255 games. Kicked 549 goals for Port Adelaide. That's incredible. Played 2 games for South Australia, 3 games for Australia. AFL Premiership captain 2004, Port Adelaide captain 2006 to 2008. You won 4 John Cahill medals and 8 times Port Adelaide leading goal kicker. Look, it goes on and on, mate, but you are a legend in Australia and most importantly in your home state of South Australia.
Yeah, I had a great career, and I was one of those kids that I don't know what you're like, Woody. I know you're a pilot in a former life, but you always wanted to get your wings. I always wanted to get my prison bars jumper, the Port Magpies, the pylon jumper that is well known. And then we went into the AFL, and I was lucky at that fortunate time. I was leaving school at St Michael's, where my kids are at Henley Beach here in Adelaide, Catholic school, got drafted to Port, started their initial list, and then eventually was able to perform at the greatest stage with 21 like-minded teammates, and we won the premiership, beating Brisbane, who was going for 4 in a row. So that was a dream from a kid. And then obviously the media thing took over. So, I still stayed involved in sport. I was a presenter at Nine News in Adelaide for sport. Not supposed to be doing reporting, but I used to do a lot of reporting because I get a lot of info. Wrote for News Corp over here, which was the advertiser, doing that as a columnist in AFL, and then commentated early days with Triple M, and then more recently with 5AA. So my job was earning good money, about 300 grand a year, to do what I did, which just follow sport and love sport. And then it all abruptly ended, as you said. But those footy days were great. They taught you to stand. It was competition. It was stand for something. It was super competitive, not only with the opposition, but with your teammates. Because let's face it, any chance a teammate would get, they'd try and take your position because it was pretty competitive. But yeah, I had a blessed career. Had a lot of injuries, couple of, I think, 11 surgeries and all, a couple of knee issues that probably stifled me at the end. But it did teach you to resilience. It taught you to buck the trend. It taught you to question. Even Mark Williams, my well-celebrated coach and Hall of Famer himself, was our premiership coach. He'd often roll something out and I'd go, why? And it would be like, you can't question us. Just want to know why. And all of a sudden I find myself in a situation many, many years later going, that COVID thing, why are we doing that again? What's the benefit? What's the information behind it? So I was one of those why people, I call it. Like anything, I didn't suffer fools. I think I might not have been the greatest teammate as of the boys. I wasn't going out partying. I wasn't getting up to no good. I wasn't a big drinker. I was a pro. I wanted to be great. We'd fallen short many times in those years. But Brisbane beat us 3 years beforehand. 2 of those years, we finished top in the minor round, but we couldn't get the job done in finals. We dropped key games, and ultimately didn't get there. But in 04, it seemed like everything clicked, and that's now in the history books. But geez, that's 20-year anniversary was last year. So 21 years this year. So a long time's happened. I'm now got a totally bald head. Back then I was a partially bald head. So a lot has moved in those years. But I think you learn in those instances many great groundings and many great opportunities to learn as a but also too, as an individual. What do you stand for? What are your ethics? What's your ethos? Do you have a bit of integrity? Do you have a bit of dignity? Do you have a bit of leadership? All those things. And I think that's where sport is a wonderful thing. No matter which sport you play anywhere part of the world, it teaches teamwork. It teaches all the individual things that being a lone warrior out there doesn't do.
Absolutely. Johnny.
Yeah, well, Warren, we interviewed Nick Takos very early in the piece, and he's obviously got his finger on the pulse with regards to footy in Adelaide. Run us through what was going on at Port Adelaide. I mean, you were obviously getting the gossip. There was a lot of players that were forced to take this jab. I mean, some of them obviously took it willingly, but I mean, others I imagine were very sceptical about it. But what happened? I mean, players were reportedly dropping on the field, having heart issues. What can you tell us?
Well, to be fair, there's not that much I can tell you from that space. So I'm back involved in club and the board level right now, to try and get our on-field stuff, getting to hopefully win a premiership. But from that distance, from afar, it was pretty much my time in that space was heading into that end of the year where, like Channel 9 for me, was putting in a mandate end of the year. I spoke on 5AA, and ultimately that come as part of the decision in court. I didn't get an official warning from my boss, but all I said is, hey, we've played pretty much the 2020 year and 2021 whilst it's been interrupted. And I knew it was experimental. I knew how it got through and got it approved. My news director didn't even know about that at the time. I suspect the players, AFL players, were only going on the information that they received. The club doctors are getting the information they received from APRA and all those situations, and then pretty much from the AFL's system too. So, for the players, it was effectively quite simply there were a few that stood up. And Liam Jones stood out of footy for 12 months, and I have a huge amount of respect for him because it was just not for him. And even in my situation, I didn't say don't go and do this thing. I just said it's not for me. So, and I think fundamentally any decision has to come back to that individual. There are a number of players who, it became a bit of a promotion too. And I know Gil McLaughlin at the time stood up at the Brownlow and said this final thing. They crowned my old club, Port Adelaide's Ollie Wines, as Brownlow medalist. And then soon after, I said, go and get vaccinated. And the propaganda piece for me was the bit that really didn't sit right. I also know that Jack Darling, who's back playing now, at that stage has sort of been someone who had to train away from the club, I'm guessing for about 2 or 3 months at West Coast, because he didn't want to do it, because I think his wife and he, it's since come out that they were, they've chosen a path of sort of not anti big pharma, but natural health. And there's nothing wrong with that. And this is the bit where I've sit back here. It's all individual. And for me, it's not about judgment. Like if someone wants to go and smoke marijuana, they can do that. I know there's laws around stuff. I know people want to speed in cars. They do that. Well, that's on them. You know what I mean? That's stupid. Would I want them to do that? No, but fundamentally, people make their own decisions, and that's what we lost. So yeah, I had a situation when I was in the media and said I said emergency approved, which is the American term. It's only provisionally approved. And it was like, well, you have to do this, you have to do that. But the public knowledge of people goes, well, you need to be vaxxed for kids to go to school. And I'm going, no, you don't, not in South Australia. And I ended up sort of getting a little bit off. But my point was, hey, we've played 2 years of football. Yes, it's been massively interrupted because Victoria has been proven that they've gone way over and above with Dan Andrews, right? For Queensland to do it and host all the games in Queensland and let certain fans in. In Adelaide, we got to 50% crowds and nearly 75% crowds in finals. So you have this same virus being treated 15 different ways effectively in Australia, it felt like at the time. So I just felt it'd be a little bit premature to go and push this on people who aren't at risk. And the people who aren't at risk were AFL players because they are super fit. Also, people who aren't at risk in that time were children. So yes, people with comorbidities and massive health issues, I can understand why people's doctors might have thought that is the best way to do it, because there wasn't much information, as we've since been proven and been proven many times since. The information has been stifled. Some of the information has just been proven in the last 24 hours that reporting of deaths didn't actually get recorded. So that wasn't passed down. So there was it was a massive stifling of information. So from my perspective is, hang on, why do we need to do this? And I got pulled into a meeting with my boss at Channel 9 and my then manager at the time. And then they were saying, well, you can't do this. It's negative. You're going to have to stifle. I said, well, hang on. It's not our job. As the media, our job is to be both sides here. And it was funny because Denny Van Hagen, who I'm not sure if you've spoken to, is a Crows AFLW two-time premiership player with the Adelaide Crows women's program. And she was a nurse at the time, and she was part of this big protest outside Channel 9 in Adelaide that obviously protested at 10, protested at Channel 7, and then Channel 9. So quite literally, I was on the first floor of Pirie Street, and I spoke to Rebecca Barnett on my Ballsy podcast about this issue and told this story. So I'm happy to tell it again, whereas I'm quite literally sitting in front of my computer here, and just down to the left-hand side, I'm on the first floor, is probably 300 nurses. And then there's this one nurse that, as the journos are filming, they're trying to get Denny to talk about whether she's going to get vaxxed because they want to, effectively, are you going to be ruled out? It was a big story, but it was a massive pile-on too. You go fast forward 12 months, and Denny's gone through a court case, the judicial review, where the government changed the law so they didn't have to rule against them. And then there's also an instance where she actually wants to have kids. So she got pregnant. Well, I can understand why she doesn't want to rush to do this, I called, and as it has since been proven correct, the provisionally approved vaccine. It was told it was safe for pregnant women. Well, it's proven that actually hasn't actually been tested or tested it properly against people who didn't have the jab. And all of a sudden, we've got this massive pile-on, and this nurse, while we're filming live, and when I say live, it's not going onto TV screens, it's going into our system. So into the router, it's in everyone's computer, you can cut it, you live edit it, so editors can do it, journos can cut their grabs out, hey, what's the sexiest grab here for the news that night? And it was a case with this... one of the nurses at the time, I don't think he's in the system anymore, and I have a bit of contact with her. And she said, well, there was a number, it was a 32 of 38 beds at Flinders Hospital, which is a big hospital down South Adelaide, full of adolescents who've had jab reactions. And I walked into the news director's office, who's Jeremy Pudney, the same guy that terminated me months later, and said, hey, have you seen that? I said, wow. That's interesting. I was just watching the protest to see what's going on, and she said this. Oh, we can't really unfound it. It's probably unfounded. I said, but isn't it our job to tell both sides of the story here? That's what a news site is. Well, we could look into it, but I'm not sure we're going to get the answer. And I said, well, we do take the government side on all this. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think it might be worth looking into. So I went and sat down. He'd pretty much been flatlined there and rejected, stonewalled. Went back and they said, walk back in, and 5 minutes later, I thought, I'll try again. So I've gone, hey, I'm a father, right? And then that stage, well, now I've got 17, I've got 3 kids and I've remarried. So I've got a blended family of 5 kids, right? And right now they're 2 14s, 2 16s, and a 17-year-old. So back then, we're talking probably 14 through to 10 or 12. And I go, well, I just want to know from a parent's point of view, I'd like to know whether it's safe or not. Yeah, well, the government said it's safe. I said, but here's a nurse who's at the coalface telling us there's issues with young kids, and I've got 2 young boys. So I'm ad-libbing a bit of the story here. And he goes, well, you're not going to have enough time to investigate that and turn that around. And from that moment, I just went, wow. And then it started piecing together what I'd said about the sport, whether the AFL players should be vaccinated. And then there was clearly a message come, which I'd heard back why I got called into a meeting with my manager. It was because it was played on Footy Classified, and Carolyn Wilson cut it up, saying I was an anti-vaxxer and I was anti this. And I said, no, all I was doing was asking a question whether it should be rushed. We should rushing people who aren't at risk get this, like a genuine discussion of the other side of the argument, as everyone in the media right then was, do this, save grandma, do this. And I said, well, that's okay, but let's take a breath, because we're talking 700 men in their prime who aren't at risk. So it just started to add up very, very quickly. And then sooner or later, and I spoke to Jared Rennick on my Ballsy podcast, who was the first person I spoke to a few months ago. And he said, it's well known that pharmaceutical companies, big pharmaceutical companies, can't advertise with media, but they can through the government. And I just went, that's the final piece of the puzzle.
There you have it. Now, for those of you who are going to make comments about this mark on this eye, Johnny sent me an electronic punch in the eye for something. No, I'm only joking. I'm an advert for wearing safety goggles when you go whippersnipping.
Yep.
When you're edge trimming, wear your safety goggles. All right. So I copped it in the eye. Anyhow, now that that's done, people can concentrate on the interview and not looking at this thing on my eye. Anyhow, all right. So clearly, and I know that, I don't know. Do you, just yes or no, do you still see yourself as having a big future in the media?
Well, back working now is probably not an easy yes or no. Where I was and what I was doing, I won't be back there unless significantly things change. So in order to answer it, do I love commentating football? Yes. Absolutely. I love it. I love calling the game. And I'm not a play-by-play caller. I'm an analyst. This player needs to happen, this. And I'm juggling it with a board role at my club. So I'm a little bit compromised in what you can talk about, whether people are going to be sacked or futures or plans or recruiting or salary caps or all that sort of stuff. But I got back involved because I love the essence of the game and I love what it stands for. Me getting back, is it challenging a little bit to people who were in the pro-vaccine period? Yeah, absolutely. But I think you need to have your left and your right fingers to have a good progressive board. But there's no doubt that some of the interviews I'm doing, and probably particularly this one, telling my whole truth story, it's the truth, and that can challenge some of the decision-making that goes around. But would I be going back into a forum of what I do? No, I couldn't work for those people again. Could I work as a sports analyst to call live football? Yes. But there's a reason I'm not getting those opportunities. It's because I stood against it, stood against the system. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that people in the jobs aren't good at their jobs. They are good. But there is all sorts of issues at play here now. AFL's broadcast rights has to have gender bases where it has to be certain mixes. Then it also has to be race bases where there has to be certain mixes. And there's only so many jobs that go around. And would I love doing an element of it? Yes. But what I've learned very much in this system is don't put all your eggs in one employer's basket, because it can quickly turn up. And the thing is too, and I had this well-documented court case, and if you want to talk about that later, we can. But what was revealed in it, I actually had, there were 5 different levels of performance. And I wasn't a natural presenter, but I was a bit of a storyteller, more of a radio personality, but I had good info and I was always working on that final polish of my presenting, but I was more an ad-libber. So that was an area I had to work on. But I had stellar reviews, and I'm not just beating my own. I gave stories to people who I work with, and they won media awards because I didn't want to highlight my contact. For example, Brenton Sanderson gets sacked from the Adelaide Crows. I fed that to I called a teammate or a workmate of mine, and he won an award. But then in my court case, it was talked about how I wouldn't probably keep my job, even if I didn't get vaxxed. And that's just the bit that was just an utter highlight and shit can of your personality. And one thing I'll stand true is I'll hold my ethics and ethos against most people. And I think I'll come, I'm not compromised. Clearly I stand and I've lost significantly coming on now, 4 years of earnings. We're in a situation where we've had to be smart. We had to sell our house. We had a dream build house on the lake at West Lakes, which is not far from the old footy park. I lived in the western suburbs of Adelaide my whole life. We sold that. Yes, we did well out of it, but we were forced to do it. So we've suffered significantly, and that's not a pity party, but that's just the reality. And I wouldn't change it because stand for something, fall for anything. And there needs to be good people like yourselves you've been standing longer, and I've sat quiet and I felt uncomfortable with that, but that was while the court case was going. But there's a lot of people who are out there fighting the good fight, and a lot of people who one thing I don't do is judge people for doing what they do.
Yeah.
I'll call them out and in a way judge them. This is where it's a bit inconsistent. Judge them if you bully people and you tried to make yourself bigger than them and you're trying to save grandma and you're trying to bully family or friends, and everyone's lost relationships. I'm no different too. But if you were forced with a gun to your head to keep your job, to keep your kids in school, to keep your lifestyle, I can understand why people did go through that. For me, and a lot of people say to me, I had to do it to keep my job. And I've got to the stage and I said, I hear that and I respect that. And you made your decision, but I had that same situation too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not making me any better than anyone else. I feel it's a deliberate agenda to divide. We're seeing it now with even little things like welcome to country. This is all these agendas to divide people. Anyone who, I said on my social media, and I'm part of the obviously Port Adelaide board, and I supported one of Trump's policies, and I supported one of RFK's policies. Well, the policies were clean up the food, make people healthier, and the other one was cut out corruption. You had a football journalist again, Carolyn Wilson, had a crack at me, calling me supporters of anti-Semites and racists. I'm like, if there's one question Trump people are questioning him about is whether he is supporter of Israel. So, and I had to sort of do some investigation into this because I'm not that switched on into that area. So I'm actually seeing now people rolling out this anti-Semite card as a way to silence people who are a different view. And what is also known as this Carolyn Wilson. Carolyn Wilson's husband was a long-time journo for the Seven Network as a political reporter, and he worked for Dan Andrews, was I stand with Dan. That was his catch cry. And now he's back with Jacinta Allen. And anyone who looks in Victoria, I'm not sure anyone is a fan of them anymore. So this is where I sit there, and people of influence are using their agenda to push a certain political agenda, whereas I'm saying, hey, welcome everyone. If someone wants to say something anti-Semite or racist or whatever, we're going to sit back and go, you know what? Some people might even say that resonates with me. Some people might say, you know what a dick. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's up to the individual. We took away any way of people having an opinion. We took away anyone having a discussion. We took away anyone to use their own resonance in a situation and their gut feel and their intuition, all because it had to be this way. Well, let's prove now, going back since 2020, we're 5 years on, what part of the government's agenda or the bigger agenda or whatever you want to believe or whoever it is worked out right. The vax didn't stop transmission. They knew that from the start. That's been proven. People's health is worse off. Who did? The so-called unvaxxed, I haven't heard of anyone crook who passed away from that, even to a stage that the numbers were manipulated that you had to survive, effectively have your vax and last 2 weeks without any reaction to actually be deemed to. So they manipulated a lot of these things. And this is, it's a bit of a hill to die on, but I just go, you know what sort of world are we going to leave our kids if we just keep putting up with this bullshit?
Johnny, Tredders is just summing everything up that we've been about for the last 4 years.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know if there's any better summation of it, Hoodie, really. I mean, I look at that little clip that we watched today that Craig Kelly shared from A Current Affair. Now, Warren worked for the Nine Network. The irony of it all, really, I mean, it's like it's done a 360 degree. I mean, here we start with Alison Langdon essentially berating Craig Kelly for being a cooker and spreading misinformation. And then we have the now today health reporter, former Deputy Chief Health Officer, Dr. Nick Coatsworth, still working in the health system, essentially saying that we were right on Ali Langdon's program, that the very channel that sacked you in court. I mean, it's
baffling, isn't it? I saw it the other day, and I haven't done a reply yet because I will in time. But what I find interesting, John and Graham, is it's almost like it's a strategic media view now to go, oh yeah, this is terrible and this should never have happened. Hang on, hang on. This is the same network, and it's not just Nine, don't get me wrong. It's not just because it's my beef with Nine or my former beef with Nine, because that's now sort of done. But how can we sit there and say that anyone reported on that ethically, authentically, and told both sides of the story? No, because we also know that there were warnings, and I've got this from inside a former employer who worked at a current affair, who said he got warnings because he was negative and Dan Andrews wouldn't support financially the networks, and you get the advertising money if you went against the agenda. And I was like, wow, right? And that's what he told me. So it's an allegation, right? And then on the other side of it, you go, you at this same time put in a mandate that started December 1, 2021, I think by memory. That was my last day of work was the 30th of November on a Tuesday. So I even had a doctor's exemption from my doctor. I wasn't eligible for a government exemption, right? We've had a history of some heart issues in the family. I wasn't eligible because only in South Australia under the Marshall government, which was a Liberal government at the time, we had 4 days of lockdown. We weren't Victoria where it felt like 400, right? Or Western Australia where you couldn't get over the border no matter what. So South Australia was a lot lamer, if you know what I mean, or a lot more controlled. But it was a blanket situation put in by the Nine Network, because in Victoria, Dan Andrews mandated about 50 or so different industries, of which one was media. So that's where, in a way, the AFL's hand was forced to stay alive. And I'm not saying make you call what you think on that, but to function and put a system to air or to travel borders, that's where they were pushed. So for me, for Nine to come back and run that story, that was simply more propaganda, or trying to say it wasn't us, look over here. Well, it was, because I provided, and I had Dr. Petrovsky, who you may have spoken to over the journey, who's a vaccinologist, and I don't know, I use my terms. He makes vaccines and he's an expert. Yeah. So I had him in court, and he revealed that it didn't stop transmission. He said there was a lag effect. So it almost called out the stage that someone who was pre-vaxxed before the network's mandate came in, within 60 days, I think his words were, I stand corrected if it's wrong, he said the effect of the vaccine would have been gone. So you'd have a fully vaccinated staff member next to an unvaccinated staff member, and they both have the same protection. But let's face it, it wasn't against science. So for me, who was told they'd work with me, never heard about it, comes back to a judgment in the end in the court, where the court finds and sides with 2 interesting findings. One's my comments on radio, and my radio comments were deemed by my employer as not sackable, nor did I get a warning. And the other ruling by the judge was off the back of points of direction. So Nine gave, effectively, we agreed with Nine, I think it was 5 directions that they told me to get vaccinated. So I effectively lost a court case in my employment because I didn't put my status in a portal. And that's 12 months after the network was totally hacked and cameras couldn't operate, and it had to be manual use because supposedly they were hacked by China or Russia or whoever it was, that it actually was a legitimate thing. And I was advised not to. Even though I'd had 4 different meetings with HR, they knew my status was unvaccinated. I'd provided an exemption, a doctor's exemption, not a government one, because I wasn't eligible to get that, because their process was you're either vaxxed and get the tick, or you're had a government exemption which got the tick, which is impossible, and I wasn't eligible for it. So in the end, I lost a court case, and it felt, to be honest, it felt reverse engineered. And in the clause, the key clause in my contract, without going through all of it, says any direction needs to be both lawful and, not or, and reasonable. The judge's findings said we found it lawful, but if the case rests on reasonability, Nine would effectively be in all sorts, because they didn't work with me. They revealed that they didn't have a chain of information. They couldn't tell us that the health information that they used to make their mandate, and they couldn't tell you who did it. It was just a meeting, and it was written down on notes, and there were no notes provided. So quite literally, the judge has changed the word "and" to "or," and they've got their out. Baffling.
Unbelievable.
So we talk the court of law where you're supposed to be upheld. and everything's got to be fair and reasonable. And even my case, where I had some people working, donating their time to me, and some wonderful people. You might have spoken to Stuart Lindsay, former Supreme Court judge,
Yep.
and King's Counsel has been a warrior, Loretta another, Paulina another. And he was baffled at the finding and the decision because, yeah, it didn't pass the sniff test, as my old manager said. But yeah, that is what it is. It cost us in excess of $250,000, not let alone a lost wages. But how's this bit? Nine would have spent, and we were able to be in a really interesting situation. We entered the federal court because I was a contractor, I wasn't an employee. So I was, for tax purposes, I was a contractor. So I worked, was it 46 weeks of the year, 6 weeks holidays, work public holidays, whatever. So we were able to get in there. But Nine didn't realise when we lost the case, we lost the court costs as well. But we appealed that because it said you had to put in effectively your findings to say, well, this happened. They didn't realise we entered through that. So it's just a total case of bluff. Even in the negotiations, I was owed 11 months on a contract. I signed my contract for less money in COVID because I thought the place was struggling financially because of lockdowns and all that. So I dropped 10 grand in salary. I signed a 2-year deal. This was in the middle of the 2-year deal. So it's not even like the network didn't know COVID was happening. It was happening. Even when I got the discussion around my comments, I said, well, you're going to put in a mandate. No, I haven't seen anything like that. So the whole situation just did not add up simply because, the network would have spent, if I spent 250 grand of our own money, right, plus all the people that helped us, right, they would have had 2 staff, maybe 3 staff for everyone I had, fully on the hook. They would have spent upwards, I think, probably 700, 750 grand, right? And I offered to settle it for the 11 months left on my contract. But they've gone and spent millions, if you add in appeals and all this sort of stuff, to hang me out to dry publicly and to have the finding where they'd burnt money. And they even said in some emails, alluded to, well, if you lose, we'll have to be, for our shareholders, have to come and get costs. So they threatened to bankrupt me. That's the way I took it anyway. So when they roll out these stories, I vomit in my own mouth. Yeah, wash it out with water and keep moving. But yeah, it's baffling. And they're not alone. It's every media place in the world. And that doesn't make me popular, but to be fair, I just couldn't give a stuff anymore. I think truth is worth more than anything. And that's the short version of the court story. But to simply attack me on day 1 and 2 about performance, it was a case, they knew how they were doing it. It was a case of, if they said something inflammatory, then 7 would make this not a story about Warren Tredrea versus 9. It's a 7 versus 9 argument. And that's how they roll. And that's how they did it. And they're all in lockstep. We saw it. We saw the presenters all over the world rolling out the same jargon, the same intros, the same whole lot. But yeah, did it feel reverse engineered? I think it did. It did feel that way. Because how you can separate a decision when it says must be lawful and reasonable, but then you rule and go, it's lawful. But if the case rested on reasonability, no one was in all sorts. And for such a big decision, boys, you got 3,000 to 4,000 employees nationwide to not document anything or have anything. Surprisingly, conveniently, it worked out that way, didn't it?
We saw reasonably early in the piece, players like Matthew Lloyd speak up on, I think it was the Footy Show, saying that they smelled a rat in the cheese factory, and that was quickly put down.
Yep.
Have you had any contact from any of these high-profile guys that sort of said, "Hey, Tredders, you're doing the right thing. We believe in what you're doing, and we think the same way"?
Let me think about that. One guy is very public, Andrew Bogut. I've had a little bit of a relationship with him with a previous management group and stay in contact with him. I think he was a classic. I think he rolled out pretty early on that he got offered 20 grand to push the narrative, and he said no thanks. So I think he's a Croatian boy, isn't he, at heart, deep down, family links. So is there others? Yeah, Nick Tarkos, I was in conversation with him. He's an Adelaide Crows board member who ended up quitting before they were going to sack him. There was a lot of stuff and a lot of stories. And is there anyone else publicly? I'm just trying to remember. There was a lot of people who agree with it. But it come down to the dollar. And even if lot of players, I assume, might have had issue, or some might have. But the footy culture is an interesting one, boys, because you sit there and, I used to get a flu vax all the time. Because the doc said, "Oh, you need this and flu." Oh, yeah, no. I said, "You trust your doc and you trust this, and it's all it means to keeping the job going." And a lot of people were like that. When you take away their livelihoods and lock them in houses and pay them JobKeeper, and their mortgages are going through the roof, and their kids are, you look at cost of living. It's just gone absolutely crazy. When I was a kid growing up, my dad was involved and he played at Collingwood, so I was sort of a father-son of footballers. So he came to Port Adelaide as a youngster in the 70s, well, middle-aged man then, and had 4 kids. So my dad had coached the Colts, or the under-19s as we called them, and back then I'd get $2 from mum and dad and get a pie and a can of tab or a soft drink of some sort. Now to go to the footy at Adelaide Oval or the MCG or Sydney Footy Stadium or Perth or the Gabba, it probably costs you $22 and you have to give away an arm and a leg and a kidney to get that. So yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. And the dynamic with all of this is that, back to the vax, the thing, and then Nine would know. I missed 3 or 4 days at work back in 2016 because I got a flu vax at work because Bupa was there, and I was, oh, well, yeah, cool, I'll do it. I had type A flu, couldn't get out of bed for 4 days. So from that moment, I just thought, I'm not going to have any of this shit again, because every time I get it, I get crook and it's not good for me.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
But the one thing on that footy show one, I know that there was a phone call made in the ad break, hence why the boys backed up really quick. And that comes back to they'll turn off the taps of the big pharma money.
What about outside of football, but still within Channel 9? I mean, we probably learnt reasonably early on that someone like Carl Stefanovic was pretty nervous about the bullshit that was being peddled. I mean, he actively pushed back against Brad Hazard in relation to the vaccines. Said that they weren't going to get any more. Channel 9 presenters have probably been in the minority in actually calling some of this out. Ben Fordham on 2GB radio in Sydney, part of the Nine group. As much as they've been the problem, some of them have actually been willing to actually do the right thing.
Yeah, I can't speak for personal knowledge because I don't know. All I know from one piece of personal knowledge is that they did that campaign, get your jab, I've had my jab, all that. And I know that one of the Adelaide presenters wasn't that comfortable doing that. One, because they're not a doctor, and two, because they just said, here, go down and record this. And it was when they record their nightly updates coming up in the news ahead, the 4 o'clock update, the 4:50 update, the 5:10, the 5, whatever, all the lead-ins. But those guys, I did watch the dynamic, and clearly Ali Langdon was the attack dog on that issue. And Carl sat back as he's the jovial one and the smart one. Whether he actually felt he's not comfortable doing it, I don't know. Or whether that was a strategic point. You can't have 2 attack dogs doing it. I know other networks have told people not to hang out with people at Christmas time. So that stuff was baffling. Ben Fordham did come out and talked about a lot of things. But I do think the skeptic in me goes, if we could actually go back in a timeline and see when these things are said, I think they were long after the 2 vax mandates were put in. And then as the confidence was cooling on that, as the exposure of all the other side of the news, the I call the real news coming out about, the less propaganda side, and maybe that was just riding the waves of, oh, we can't all be 100% anymore. We need to soften our stance because we've gone so hard. So ultimately, that's the same. You talk about Nine, it's the same network that was as brutal as anyone with the 2 vax mandates. But I also know I know people from Seven, I know people from others that were marched from their jobs. I went the course, never got offered a settlement. Sorry, I don't, that's not true. I got offered, I think, a payment of 110 grand to go away, but that's after I'd spent 200 grand on lawyers. Like, come on. If you wanted me to go away, you'd be smart. You stretch me out till the trial, then you give me more money to cover my lawyers and a little shut up. But no, it was a case that they effectively wanted to do the big dance and to do the discredit. But that's okay. That is, they do what they do, and I did what I did.
The HR department at Qantas have proven to be, and we're going to expose this soon, John. You and I haven't talked about this yet, but I've been reading some pretty damning documentation about the way that Qantas has handled the termination of pilots who refused to get vaccinated, or some more likely, not more likely, more prominently, were on sick leave who couldn't get vaccinated and said they would when they returned to work and got well. The company has treated them abominably, and they've been selective, and we've got documents to prove that. We've got documents that will hang Qantas out in the media to make them look like dogs.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, Johnny, they are.
Mm.
Who makes them the dogs? It's the HR departments, basically. Those people in HR who sign redundancy letters with the terminology being gross misconduct. This person was fired for gross misconduct. How can a pilot or a police officer or a nurse or a teacher or a paramedic ever get a job again in their field when they've got gross misconduct on their file? Now, these mongrel dogs won't even change the wording of the redundancy letter, of the termination letter. HR departments, I call them human remains department. They're not human resources. They're human remains.
Yeah.
How was Channel 9 HR, Treaders?
Horrible. There was a case of pretty much telling me you're going to be sacked. I know that there was another person within Nine who, because I went so hard and took him on, that he got a little bit of a go away period and had a stood down period to use or leave, and then got a nice little handshake to go away. And I think that was because I was taking him on publicly. And what they probably didn't expect was anyone of their presenters, their faces on TV, to take them on. So I get it. But what it does do is I actually think deep down, you look at where all the shareholders are from all these TV networks. I know Gary Stokes is the big shareholder at Seven, but he's the majority shareholders. But who owns the rest? You can talk about the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, all the big names. But then who's in the positions of power? And for me, this was just a simple direction. It was, and by all reports, I was told, and I can't prove that it's true, but the allegation I got told is that if you were 100% compliant, there would be some money coming to that industry. So you talk about the HR. The HR was poor. In my court case, they said the second in charge HR person, conveniently Nine didn't provide the top person, Joanna, I think her name is. They presented this lady, looked like she was a mum. She was a good businesswoman. She sat there and was the worst witness you'll ever see. Quite literally, as soon as proceedings started, face went bright red, arms went bright red, didn't have any info, effectively said that industry, as I touched on before, that's got about 4,000 employees. They had a group meeting of all the group directors. So that's the news director, Darren Wick, who's since been stood down very publicly. The CEO is no longer, Mike Sneesby, is no longer there. You look at Amanda Buchan, I think she was the head of media and public relations. Conveniently, Nine she is not there anymore. And all these others, finance people, whatever, had a group decision and a discussion. And it was all written down on a piece of paper that they're going to put in a mandate. And that's where we exposed with my King's Counsel. They said, okay, so what? And this is what I talked about with the reasonability. And the judge said the reasonability effectively didn't stack up. One, they didn't work with you, even though they said they would. Just sent me on leave. Clearly, I believe, we're tipping off the media because information in my private meetings was ending up in the Adelaide Advertiser. It certainly wasn't from me because I knew I had a clause in my contract. If I spoke, they would terminate it. And yeah, the witness just could not provide anything. It was effectively just the vibe. If you talk about the castle, went to a meeting with senior executives on the biggest issue medically this probably world has ever seen in my time, certainly in my 46 years, since pre-war, since all this stuff. And you're forcing as I said, a provisionally approved, which had to be rushed to market. The testing seriously didn't stack up. We had Petrovsky pick it apart saying it never stopped transmission, but you're going to force people to do this anyway. You don't know the risks. Vaccine companies had no liability. It was going to fall on the industry and the business. If, for example, someone did do it, they'd be liable. So the Nine Network or any other business would be liable in death, and many legal people will tell you that. And all of a sudden it comes down to what? Written notes on a piece of paper. It's conveniently not documented. It was conveniently not revealed publicly, and it was a laughing stock, but they get away with it because it's a little bit of like the old Pfizer. Pfizer have probably been the most criminally caught out medical company in the world, and it's documented they paid out billions in settlements, but they're still creating products. It was baffling. It was baffling to say the least. And yeah, I'm no longer there. That's a there's a positive in that, but there's been a massive cost that's been paid both professionally and privately and financially. And my kids have had to grow up around this. And, you talk about 5 kids in a school, and the school handled it quite well, I think. But they've even got teachers telling kids about vaccine. Like school teachers are telling people anti-vaxxers and vaxxers. And our kids tell us this stuff. And I'm like, hang on, you're in a Catholic school and you have no education about any of this shit, and you're ramming this and kids' propaganda down kids' throats. I think it's disgusting. So yeah, your original question, how were they handled it? They were clearly given a directive to do it. And I feel they were clearly given a directive to say, don't leave any paper trail, and we're going to roll this out no matter what. And then they revealed in this instance, in my case, they never actually came to Adelaide to look over whether they could isolate. Because I said they have a TOS studio, it's called Talent Operating Studio. You see those pop-up studios? They very much looks like what we're doing here on Zoom. So you could have the big studio. You could isolate. We're already 1.5 meters for each other on the panel, so we're a bigger, further away. I offered to do my job from location, and most nights I'm out on location anyway. It's Adelaide Oval or the cricket or the soccer or the footy or whatever. You could have a camera in the backyard. You could put up a green screen like you're right there. You could do the talent studio, but everything was a no, 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 no.
Didn't want to cooperate.
No, didn't need to, didn't want to, and there was clearly something bigger hanging off the back of it. And you couldn't have someone who was seen to go against it. And this is the last piece of the puzzle, which I found very interesting. So early January 2022, I was on leave. I was given my normal annual leave at the end of the year, 4 weeks, to come back and find a resolution, which means get jabbed or lose your job. So I actually started feeling a bit ill. And there was a lot of people, and I tested positive, I think on the 4th of Jan, right? And it came through, no, on the 5th of Jan, but on the 4th of Jan, I was isolating in the house for 2 days before I got the positive test. The night before I got the test through from SA Health saying you were positive, isolate for 2 weeks because you're unvaccinated. Channel 9 sent a letter saying they'd sack me. So here I was. If that happened 24 hours later, and I'm not sure whether I'd want to be working there ever again. I think the answer is certainly not. But I would have been eligible for a government exemption for I think 3 or 6 months because I was positive, and you can't be vaccinated when you're positive. So call the irony in that situation. I caught it. I had sweats. I felt nauseous. I had 2 days of feeling flat. I had to isolate for another period of time. I think it was 10 days. I can't remember what it was. It's a while ago now. But in the meantime, I got sacked while I actually had this so-called virus that was going to kill me, which was a mildish flu, not even worse than the type A flu that I got a few years earlier after getting a vaccine, a flu vax at Channel 9 back in about 16 or something like that. So here I was actually recovering from this so-called virus that was going to kill me. And I had antibodies, I had all that. And I pretty much guarantee you, I don't know this answer, but I guarantee you they wouldn't let me in anyway because I've gone against them, and 2, I wasn't vaccinated, and they probably would have stood me down anyway because it had to be 100 compliance or nothing, and everyone would have known I wasn't vaccinated.
Warren, what price integrity?
There's no price. And this is where my decision, Hoodie, came back to. I wrestled with, do I just get it? And even my wife sort of said, Bianca said at the time, she said, okay, so if it goes to 2, which you'll have to do, then it's to 3, then it's to 4, and then what price? And she goes, no, if you choose not to and we choose not to, then we'll find a way through this. You know what I mean? But we were not hell-bent, but we'd had the dream of, we spent 40 grand on doing whole new plants. We had one of the best architect places in Adelaide, who's a great friend of my wife, who'd done us a deal because they'd faced COVID challenges too, to dream this dream house on the lake with all the kids growing up, all the things that we wanted to have, had the mortgage locked away and signed and done all that. What's your price? It came back to, it was a really difficult decision, but fundamentally it was a very straightforward decision. Do I want to put this in my body that I know that the beauty of Telegram and all these so-called unverified info was showing medical studies over in Israel, people 4 and 5 jabbed, and I'm like, this is not looking good for immune systems. I said, do I want to back my own health? Yes. If I do this, it's about health. It's about nothing else. So fundamentally, I'm like, I'm not prepared to do this for my health or my kids' health. And then the repercussions came later. But fundamentally, it was about my integrity for myself, for believing in my own beliefs. Because I tell you right now, if I gave in and I did this, I don't know where it could be. And I had a discussion, as I said earlier, with my doctor in the last 48 hours. And he says he's seeing issues all over the state, from speeding cancers to people dropping dead. He said there's issues left, right, and centre. So what's the price? The price comes back to what you're willing to do. And for me, I was like, no, this is not for me. Health-wise, it's not for me. If you want to go and do it and Johnny wants to do it and Freddie wants to do it and whoever, that's on them. But on me, I'm not doing this. And as a parent, I'm like, we're not doing this. And I would have, if had it been as bad as we thought, and if it was worse than what was being portrayed, I would have to have lived with that too. But fundamentally, the decision was, no, I'm not doing it. And then the rest took its course. And I've woken up a lot, consciousness-wise, authenticity-wise, lost friends, lost family. But it had to be this way.
So you wouldn't do it any differently?
Oh, there's some instances you could have handled things differently. Would I have gone to court? Would I know now? Would I have wasted that period of time and invested that money? Probably would have been smarter to do that. But I felt I needed to make a stand for me principally and my wife and my family. And one thing you do get from that, which doesn't mention a dollar, because we haven't renewed a dollar. And as we know, podcasting doesn't pay too bloody well. Okay. But you galvanize people, you give people some hope. And I'm not here to say I'm the bloke with the big shield out the front, follow me. But I liken it to a footy situation where you're looking for a bit of a leadership, and there's a lot of people who have the same thoughts, and they might have been teetering on the edge. And there've been some instances where so many people reached out on social media and said, what you did is great. Right. And then other people said, oh, yeah, you're foolish. And the other people said, what you did is great, but don't bite them in the system. Well, I did. It didn't work. Is that the end of it? We don't know. Have I gone to learn about individual sovereignty and what's right and what's your belief? And I would never have met you boys. I would never have met the great man in Trevor Hendy, who's helping coach me and I've spoken to on my podcast. Would have never have met Senator Rennick, who I think should be a Prime Minister one day of Australia because he actually gives a shit about Australians, not the rest of the people we see. You know what I mean? Like independent journos like Rebecca Barnett. There's some phenomenal people. Like I've got a chat with AJ Roberts, a former military guy in the UK. It's coming up in the next week on my podcast. And what he talks about is a bigger picture of what he saw in the world wars and Afghanistan and stuff. And I'm like, wow, like this stuff has blown my mind for what I thought was happening in the world. Port win on the weekend. She's all great and it's wonderful. And if that's your life, that's cool. But for me, I'm like, that doesn't add up. There's my old manager, and I've said this many times, Jeff Motley is a former Australian Football Hall of Famer, South Australian football legend, was my manager, and Nathan Buckley and Craig Bradley and a few others in his time. And he passed away, I reckon it was 18 months ago, 2 years ago now. And his thing was, son, he used to say, son, if it doesn't pass the sniff test, there's normally something wrong. And for me, COVID didn't pass the sniff test. And it started on the news desk, coming up in sport. We do the lead in. COVID, and you watch this person drop. Geez, that looked a bit weird. Okay. Next minute, go, you get this vax, you won't catch it. Hang on, 6 weeks later, you get this vax, you'll catch it, but you won't spread it. Okay, but then you'll spread it 6 weeks later, but then you'll save grandma. To then now, oh no, there's a chance that it could have damaged immunity systems. Now we're hearing about spot cancers. Now we're hearing about excess deaths at one stage with 30% up. It just in footy terms, I like to play a game where I know the goalposts are. In COVID, they kept moving them.
It's a bit hard to kick a goal when they shift the posts on you at the last minute.
Yep.
But as we go back, Johnny, it must have been 2 years ago, we had the Athletes with Voices series. We had Ken Reutges from the Green Bay Packers. We had Trevor Hendy. We had Pat Cash. We had Kelly Slater. And others. I don't know whether you saw it or not, Warren, but it was a great panel. But those guys were absolutely creamed for being on our show. They were.
Yep.
Yeah, Kelly Slater was decimated because he was on Club Grubbery. I think if we were to run that same panel now, I think the situation would be vastly different.
Yeah, the temperatures certainly changed a lot, and you guys did some unbelievable heavy lifting. I did mine walking into court, not talking to journos, and being on the front page of the paper in a way. But part of me and even my wife saying, you got to just stuff them, come out and talk. And in hindsight, we probably should have. But even now, all I'm finding with my ballsy podcast and like what you guys are doing, the temperature's changed. The people have lost faith. And now all of a sudden, and I don't watch news, and I watched a bulletin on Seven for the first time since I was stood down in a full episode. And I turned to my wife, and this probably won't help me get a job with Seven. And I said, I feel dumber after watching that. Like it was just little bits, stolen a car, something is, new medical treatment. And I thought this was the bee's knees. You know what I mean? So now, yeah, I think the temperature has massively changed. And when I looked at my old employer and I blocked them and I did those immature little things thinking that was going to help as part of my recovery from it all. But when you say we're the news you can trust, you don't have to tell people you trust them.
No.
People just know you can trust them. You don't have to tell people you're a good person. People just know you're a good person. So the game's up, and I think watching every day it all fall apart, Johnny. Yeah, you look at what Trump's over there doing, and people bashed him. And I don't know Trump. Could be the biggest PRICK in the world. I don't know. But I judge actions, and I'm looking going, hang on. He looks like he's going to pull off world peace in the Middle East right now.
Exactly.
Surely that's a good thing.
Well, I mean, you'd know from the podcast. I mean, Hoodie and I know that what we're doing essentially is the new form of media. I mean, what 7, 9, and the ABC were doing wasn't good. I mean, look at this morning. I mean, if Channel 9 had put 1/100th of the time and effort into investigating COVID instead of running around trying to trip up a war hero like Ben Roberts-Smith, we wouldn't be in this mess. It's just absolutely criminal what's gone on and what they've done to you.
So what's happened there? I haven't seen that, boys. Let's chat about that because that was a massive story, and obviously I think Seven backed Ben Roberts-Smith too. So what's the finding today?
Well, today they've found in Nine's favour, and they've upheld the decision and said that yes, he's likely guilty of murdering 4 people.
So then Seven's up for 30 to 40 million in costs,
unless they take it to the High Court.
Wow,
it's an outrage, really. I mean, it's hard to believe that this sort of stuff goes on. There's 35 people die on the same day from a vaccine, and the TGA covered it up. There's nothing to see here, not a sound. I mean,
Ben Roberts-Smith's doing war crimes, eh? They say.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
There's an interesting irony there, isn't there?
Exactly. And isn't it lovely how the government did it with all these vaccine injured? Warren, they trained these boys to do the unspeakable things that politicians couldn't and wouldn't do. They send them over there to do it. They pump them up to do it. Then they give them a medal for doing it. And then to maintain political correctness, they hang them out to dry when they get home. Isn't that exactly what they've done to the people who got the vaccine and got sick from it?
Well, it's funny. Mark Butler's the local rep here, and Mark Butler's the federal Labor health minister. He's a big Port supporter. And I contacted him asking if he would support Craig Kelly's no mandate for businesses because it's unknown viruses, it's unknown this. Fresh aired. Now I see Mark Butler at functions and he's sheepish and won't look at me and come near me.
He's a coward.
Well, he's not alone. There's a lot of them, but yeah. But how are we, Australia? We vote them in unanimously again. So we've still, I think by the looks of that, we've still got a lot to learn.
Somebody said to me yesterday, look, I'm really downhearted. I don't want to go on anymore. There's actually another podcaster and she's pretty punchy sort of lady. And she said, how do you guys keep doing it? And I said, well, what are you talking about? She said, well, the election. Look at all the work we put in to educate people. And she said, oh, well, I guess you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And I said, no, that's true, but it'll drink when it's dying of thirst.
Yep.
And I think this country needs to fall harder than it has. I think we've had it too soft for too long. And I think we need a kick in the guts to wake people up. And I think it's coming. It's coming in a big way. And people better brace themselves for it.
Yeah.
The sad part is, gents, it didn't need to happen.
No, but this is the bit. It's been happening, I think, for 30, 40, 50 years. And I've been awake for 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 of the 50 years. You know what I mean? I'm first to say I didn't see this 5 years ago. it was just this incident sparked me. And we talk about, and this is where, my podcast is not just about the COVID stuff. I've got some experts in the field talking about fasting. I've tried stuff in fasting that I've never gone. I've gone vegetarian for a period of time. I've pretty much totally given up grog. I've tried to give up coffee, and I was a 5-a-day coffee man. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's awoken the inner bit of spirit in me. And I know it sounds a bit wanky, but the consciousness. And even I say, why can't people see this to people? And then you speak about people who deal in consciousness and energy and spirit and all this, which is very unlike a footballer who was from Alberton and the working class blue collar Port Adelaide. And they go, they didn't see it because their consciousness isn't risen enough. And be grateful that we can see it. And it is frustrating and it does take a toll on you. But imagine the poor person who's a single parent, won't get the government payments for child support or whoever, or government support, and they're fighting the good fight of being a great parent, and then you're expecting them to give up their job when all they've got is next to nothing. I think that's where compassion needs to come in. On the contrary side, yes, we got called anti-vaxxers. We were effectively spat on publicly, locked out of things. And speaking to people in Perth or Victoria, you couldn't go and do all these bits and pieces. Even AFL in South Australia locked out for 6 rounds until they obviously got the numbers high enough. But a lot of it is people are trying to just do their own survival. And as you say, look at the UK. Woody, look at the UK. That's where we're headed. Immigration untapped, getting more resources and funds going to everyone that's effectively not an Australian citizen. And people will whack me on that, but that's what I see. When I spoke to Rennick on my podcast, he talked about the biggest issue is debt. The biggest issue is the untapped debt. We look at our government have just added an extra staff to their ministers. They've got more ministers than they've ever had before. We effectively look like an election, and this is what I saw. It didn't look like the Liberal Party in Dutton really made a fist of actually fighting on the point of difference, because they just wanted to stay away from Trump policies because they didn't want to be called a right-wing extremist, when I think Australia was hanging out for someone to rescue them. But
Absolutely.
And as you say, until the mentality changes, and this is what someone said, we just want to be left alone. And that's, unfortunately, the positive of Australia is also the negative.
Warren, we've all been wearing in this country a football jersey for 50 or 60 years. It's faded. And the logo on the emblem on our football jersey says the lucky country. It's gone. It's faded. You can't read it anymore, folks. It's over. The lucky country days are over. The harder you work, the luckier you get. It's always been that way in Australia, but too many people are sitting on their ass saying we're the lucky country. Well, we ain't lucky anymore. I just come back from America, and they reckon that we're worse than communist China.
Yeah.
They look at what's going on in Australia and they say, you guys are cooked, well and truly cooked. And we've just re-elected a communist government. We get what we deserve. To all those people out there that didn't vote, well, there you go. You get what you deserve. You can't change a system unless you get into that system, as crooked as it is. I don't know any other way other than armed revolution.
Yeah.
And who wants
we can't do that anyway. And John, that picture I assume at the background of yours is the Canberra convoy. We didn't have Canberra here. We had, my wife was going to the marches when I couldn't, because if I was spotted, I'd lose my job at 9 before the mandates kicked in. And they said, there was 200 people marching. There were 10,000 people marching in South Australia. But it's funny, as soon as they drop off the pressure, they drop off the communism or the little bits of the squeezing of the people, we all go back onto our own jobs, because you think life sort of returned back to normal. But people's there. It's only going to take a certain amount of time for people to stand until they've had enough. And I don't know how you guys are. Like, I'm a bit emotionally disconnected into all of it now. It's all like judging on what I'm seeing overseas and speaking to people who give some insight. And part of my stuff is just to educate people on different stuff. And it's whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. You can't put that there. Well, you can. And if you think it's a load of crap, don't listen to it. And this is what I got from when I spoke to Pete Evans. If you like what I do, great. Come on the journey. If you don't. Simple. Dismiss it. And it's no different if someone wants to hand you a can of Dr. Pepper or Coke. You either like it or you don't. Yes, thanks. No, thanks. Like, it's as simple as that. So I think it comes back to that situation that people are going to have to sit back and rise. But if they're happy with things going on, well, that's fine too. But yeah, for me, it wasn't about sitting back and just going that, because it didn't smell right, as I said. And yeah.
Well, I don't think people realise that this stuff's still going on. I mean, you look at someone like Justin Paul, that played state of origin football for New South Wales, played for the Dragons and Parramatta. I mean, he loved football, but he wanted to be a police officer. And he built a career as a police officer, and they sacked him. They sacked him for not complying with the COVID vaccine. Now, because of what happened to him in the way that he was sacked, he got a 181D from the commissioner, which said that he'd been sacked for misconduct like the other 55 officers. They can't even get a security license.
Yeah.
And this is still the case to this day. I mean, it's absolutely obscene. The court said, I can't go back to work. It went to the appeal court, can't go back to work. And now they're crying out for paramedics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this country's gone nuts, fair dinkum.
Yeah, and it's all controlled, and we're effectively being dictated to by external forces, really. That's my take on it. If we think we actually have these decisions and we think our politicians have done all this stuff, well, even the local South Australian government, where it's very Labor here in Malinauskas, Springs Live Golf, and it's a great event, don't get me wrong, and has AFL gather round when you have every team play 8 games in this effectively South Australia, a couple in the Barossa for tourism stake, and it costs big money. But we still haven't fixed ramping, which was the biggest promise that at the election, effectively at the end of that 2021 year, I reckon, in COVID. And Marshall government, Liberal government, didn't do bad, considering everyone else is probably gold star compared to what we saw with Palaszczuk saying, yeah, we'll host the AFL and NRL grand finals. Oh, we'll go into lockdown for one case on a PCR test that the creator of the PCR test said it's not a diagnostic tool. So it's baffling. It's baffling. And all of a sudden, it's not that, and I know Peter Salo, and he seems like a really nice bloke. But if you think them changing the law when the judicial review's going through, the judge not allowing, and a judge, I'm told, very early in their tenure on the bench, not allowing Nicola Spiria, the head of SA Health, to testify in court, and they still haven't given the reason to this day, it smells to me that it's a bit of a controlled situation.
But in our case, they did allow Kerry Chant to come, but they wouldn't allow Brad Hazzard, the Minister for Health.
Yeah.
But Kerry Chant came to court and said, nothing to see here. It stops transmission.
Yeah, well, the police commissioner here said, oh, yeah, I took the advice from the federal health, the state health chief officer of health, Nicola Spiria. Grant Stevens, who's the head copper, who was the emergency person that the Premier put in. And like, I look at him and go, and I know him to say hello, and see him at many functions and talked to him a couple of weeks ago. So clearly they know where I stand. But I sit there and go, okay, so he might be privy to a little bit more information, but which police officer's going to tell the head of health, chief health officer, what to do when it's a medical issue or a virus issue in the pandemic? And our health officer here, Nicola Spiria, is a doctor for kids. I've forgotten the name right now. She's not a vaccine, microbiologist or anything like that. Yeah. So when you got Dr. Petrovsky, who's in the state, who has created all sorts of what do you call it? Fixes for viruses all over the world and won multiple awards, tells you I ain't right. And all you do is pull his funding from the university so he can't work anymore. That's another sniff test that's got a really rotten pong to it.
Well, Alan Novak, a good mate of ours from Adelaide, you know Alan.
He's a legend.
He's a legend. He nailed the Premier of South Australia at the time on an aeroplane, and I think he got Nicola Spiria. I mean,
I think they called the cops on him when he was asking us some questions. And he also went to the Adelaide tennis tournament, the hard court, I don't know what they call it now, before a couple of weeks out from the Australian Open. He said, I stand with Novaks when Novak Djokovic was there. So Alan's a bit...
they ended up getting him in the end.
Takes up a good fight.
They got a dog let loose on him, didn't they, Woody?
Yeah. I think that might have... I don't know if it was a police dog, though.
It was an attack dog, and I tell you what, it had an effect on him.
Yeah, well, anytime, let's give some little bit of context. Anytime you're riding a bike and someone lets their dog off the chain and it launches at you and lands in an area men would rather have it not land in, yeah.
What can we say?
Probably not the only flesh wound he's had.
Tredders, I hope this isn't the last time we get to talk together, mate. It's been very refreshing.
Mate, happy to chat anytime, boys. We're all... Yeah, what are we doing? We fighting the cause? Well, we're just standing in our own authenticity, and good on you for doing what you do. And there's many people out there, and a lot of people do really do appreciate what everyone's role they're trying to play here. And if we've got to stand for something, or we fall for everything.
Well, we've also got to start thinking about solutions. We can't stay in the bubble, but it's very hard to let go of what's happening, of what we've been through in the last 4 or 5 years when we're starting to see it crumble in the mainstream media, which it has in the last few days. So let's keep the pressure on, but let's also look at solutions. And we're going to do that with Professor Ian Plimer and Gigi Foster on one of our upcoming shows. And we're talking to Ian Brighthope last night about putting a panel together with some eminent doctors and Gigi Foster and some others to discuss alternative healthcare. We need hospitals where people can go without having to be bullied to follow hospital policy. There's been a few cases lately that Ian and I have been involved in, which have been heartbreaking. So it's time. We've got to build something different.
Maybe we should
Agreed.
get a panel together, Hoodie, with the sports people again,
Absolutely.
and Warren can come and join us.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy to, boys. I remember did see that back in the day. Kelly Slater did speak out. Yep. But it's funny though, like I sit back now and you talk about it. Greatest surfer ever to grace the planet spoke out about something he didn't think added up. Gets lambasted by all. Still probably as strong as anything. And if anything, he's what we see now and what you probably see on your socials. Anyone like, and Joe Rogan's a classic. They shit canned him for everything. And now, if anyone gets the interview anywhere in the world, it's him. He can get Trump. He even offered Kamala, but she didn't want to show. He vaccine specialists, MMA fighters. He gets anyone and everyone, and it's the new media and it's the new way of communicating to people because no longer do we get home at 5:55, flick on the news at 6 o'clock and get told what to do. I just do imagine and do bring myself some perspective and everyone else to think about this for a tick. When I was a kid growing up, born in 78, 80s and 90s, it was always, and I was a newsboy, that's why I ended up working in news. And from footy news, I used to read it back to front the paper, sport first and then news later. But imagine a world where COVID hit 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. All we would ever have got, there was no digital news. There was no, I call them weapons of mass destruction, the phone.
Yeah.
There was no Zoom. There was no PCs. There was probably computers, but there was no laptops. We didn't even have earbuds or phones, all this sort of stuff. We would have been left with 6 p.m. news, radio, right, either FM or AM, and a newspaper, all of which were the ones and the main culprits for pushing the agenda. So be grateful that we've got X and Elon, as different as he is, created a chain to people to speak. Telegram, even YouTube have lacked since, Rumble, these types of things. It spread like wildfire. And, I think now people are in a better space to realize, one, don't trust the bullshit again. And now we're in a situation where information is freely passed. And this is the time where it's really opening up. And thank God to some big people in big places in the world, and judge the actions, not the personality. We don't want to hear LeBron's the best person and king in the world because we don't know the person. You know what I mean? This I look up to. Self-sovereignty is where it's at. And you touch on that. Whether you're religious or not, for me, what I've learned in this journey, it's whether you can go to a church and you want to pray to God, that's great for you. If you don't, then you don't. But I think the God authenticity is internal. It is, we all know what is right in our heart space, in our intuition or in our spirit. And you got to act aligned. And if everyone did act aligned that, we wouldn't have been through what we've been through. But that's the lesson we have to learn.
There's an innate sense of right and wrong in everybody. And I'm about to honour the one who put it there when I pray this to a close, if you don't mind, mate.
No worries.
Dear Lord Father in heaven, we just thank you for truth. In Scripture, John 8:32, you said to know the truth and the truth shall set you free. So, Lord, we're looking for freedom, but we're looking for a freedom that will last. And we ask you to guide us with integrity, love and compassion. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Johnny Larder, you've often been heard to say,
you just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't make this stuff up. And don't forget, you can lead a horse to water and you can't make it drink unless it's dying of thirst. Let's not wish that on our country, but here it comes. Thanks for watching Australia, and wherever you are around the world, we've got a wonderful global audience, and met a lot of them in America when I was over there. It was great. We look forward to coming back to you with another interview on Club Grubbery. Warren Tredrea, you're a champion, mate. You're a champion on the field. You've been a champion through the last 4 years, and we honour you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you,
Just
boys. And if anyone wants any other info alternative to this Club Grubbery, which is absolutely brilliant, the Ballsy Show's my new podcast. Check it out. YouTube, all the podcast bits, and throw us some ideas. I think more information, more opinion, the better, and bring it on. That's what we've stifled the last few years. So thanks, boys.
Well done.
that's how you get onto it. You just Google ballsy, do you?
Ballsy Show. Yep, it's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. It's on YouTube. And also at Warren Tredrea, Instagram, and all that sort of stuff. So yeah,
Don't Google.
if you Google Ballsy, it might be a little bit different, but
Don't.
Ballsy Show might be a little bit more different and probably a bit more content than you could stomach.
I don't know how good this program is of yours, Warren, because you haven't invited us on yet.
Well, hang on, I only just got started. And if
Good
you're going to roll
cracker.
that stuff out, I'm going to have to censor you.
All right. Thanks for coming on, mate. God bless you all. Thanks, everyone, for your support. We'll see you next time on Club Grubbery. Bye for now.